Hello and welcome, everyone. We're really happy to have you here today for the first in this 6-session series, Day 1 and Beyond, which will take you through a series of topics and activities related to building out on Oracle Cloud. For anyone who might be new to these events, we are hosted on Cloud Customer Connect, which is our Oracle community forum for end users. You'll see some links in the chat that I'll share throughout the presentation today that will lead you back to those CCC forums. And if you are not already a member, we invite you to create a free account, join in discussions there, and look for upcoming events on all kinds of topics. My name is Kenna Kettrick. I'm a program manager with the OCI Go-to-Market team. And today I'm joined by Kumar and Brandon Alarie, both cloud engineers here at Oracle. And today they'll be focusing on OCI business operations and governance quick start. That is quite enough for me. So go ahead and take it away, Brandon. It's all yours.
Thanks, Kenna. Hi, everyone. My name is Brandon Alarie. I'm a cloud engineer here at Oracle on the customer enablement team. And today we're going to be focusing on business operations and governance and kicking off our Day 1 and Beyond series. And today I am joined with another cloud engineer from the customer enablement team, Uma. Uma, if you want to introduce yourself before we get started.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Brandon. Hi, everybody. I'm Kumar. So I also work with Brandon on our customer enablement team, mainly focusing in OCI infrastructure and platform as a service. So we're really excited to just be here today and kind of bring you the second iteration of this series, Day 1 and Beyond. And yeah, today we'll kind of be focusing on kind of the tools to help with cost management and just business operations and governance. So I'm excited to get started.
Thank you. And for today's agenda, this is, a summary of what we're going to be covering today. So first, we're going to start with compartments. Then we'll take a look at tagging, some of the best practices around tagging. We'll take a look at budgets and quotas within your tenancy. And then finally, we'll take a look at Cloud Advisor. And we'll also demonstrate some of these tools to you within the actual Oracle Cloud Console. All right, so this first slide here, this is our shared responsibility model. So you can see with an on-premise environment, you're responsible for everything down to the physical infrastructure and hardware that you plan to run your systems and environments. And then as you step down with a cloud provider, there's different offerings. So we have our infrastructure as a service, where the responsibility of, the physical hardware and the infrastructure all the way up to virtualization is actually placed on the cloud provider. And then, the customer would be responsible for the data, managing users, and the operating system. And then with platform as a service, you can see how that the operating system is now a responsibility of the cloud provider. And then with software as a service, or SaaS, that application is actually going to be a responsibility of the cloud service provider. So, with a SaaS model, as an end user, you're only going to be responsible for the data that you're putting into the application and managing your users.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of just to add on to it too, like it's not completely as strict as this diagram shows. Like even in our infrastructure as a service, the virtualization layer, it's taken care of by Oracle, depending on, what type of service you want to use. Like if you would like to use a virtual machine, but you still have the flexibility of, if you wanted to bring your own hypervisor, let's say, create your own virtual machines off a bare metal host, that's totally possible to do. So it's kind of great to have this variety of options, so you can kind of pick and choose what works best for your guys's, use case.
Yep. So the first point we're going to talk about today is compartments. So a compartment is a collection of related resources that can be accessed only by groups that have been given permission by your administrator within your organization. So if you look at our visual here, we have our network infrastructure compartment. And we can see that a lot of our networking components, such as our load balancers, virtual cloud networks, and some gateways are, located within our network infrastructure compartment. But you can also break these out to organize your resources, whether that be by environment or by team. And then you would apply policies to your groups that you create for these compartments, depending on which users or resources you want to access the resources in these compartments. And some of the common use cases here that we have with compartments are access control boundaries, customer and isolation boundaries, cost boundaries, and then budget and quota boundaries as well. And, when you're doing your cost analysis, you run your cost analysis based upon compartment. So that's another use case there.
Yeah, and kind of what's great about compartments is it offers kind of a lot of different functionalities. So not only are you able to kind of organize the different resources that you guys are using, so they're just not kind of like floating around in your tenancy, but like Brennan mentioned, they're also used to grant access for different resources and how you want the different groups and users in your company basically being able to use and interact with these different applications and cloud resources, as well as a way for cost management too. So we'll talk about budgets a little bit later on. And so being able to create and set different budgets based off of your different compartments as well, kind of gives you more control over what's happening and like insight into your tenancy in general.
Yep. And then to add on to that, we also have tagging. So tagging is used to add contextual information to your resource. Essentially, it's metadata that you would attach to your resources, and it's used for cost attribution and then just assigning, extra metadata to your resources so you and your organization can better track your resources. We have our freeform tags, and then we have our defined tags. So with freeform tags, your users can, go to any resource and enter any information that they want or any tag that they want. But we also have our defined tags, which gives you, a schema that you can put together and create. And then it gives you more control over your tags and then who can manage them and who can use them. We have our tag namespaces, and essentially this is like that logical container for your defined tags that you'd set up for IAM and access control. And then you can also set up cost tracking tags to analyze your cost based upon certain tags.
Yeah, and actually just to kind of answer some questions in the Q&A really quick before we move on, we had one question asking if there is an efficient way to integrate costs in OCI into e-business or any ERP cloud or third-party billing. So for this session, we'll mainly focus on the costs involved just in OCI. I do believe you mentioned there might be a documented solution using our Oracle integration cloud. That we'll have to do some follow-up. I don't know if Larry or Jeremy has any insight into this, but there's probably a way to be able to integrate those costs with your third-party applications as well. But for now, the cost management we're going through is kind of strictly in the resources that you have in OCI. And then the second question was regarding compartments. There's a cost boundary that we mentioned. And so can we translate this as a way to route costs to particular departments? Definitely. So it depends on you, what you would want your compartments to be consistent of. I think in the graphic, it showed, we were splitting it up based off of the type of infrastructure. So there was like a networking compartment, but several customers like to also build compartments based off of the different departments, or as well as different projects that they're working on. So those are kind of ways to be able to route those costs to specific departments. If you want to create a compartment saying like, okay, this is specifically for like our financials or whichever department you're trying to kind of target, that's a way to kind of see where you can like allocate the resources and then look at the different costs that way.
Yep. And another way you could do that also is just set up a defined tag with a list of different departments, and you can make that a cost tracking tag. So you could track your costs back to that specific, tag of the department that you set. So there's a couple different ways that you could do that. And Uma, do you want to take us through some of the more details around tagging?
Yeah, for sure. So like Brandon mentioned in the previous slide, we have different types of tags. There's free-form tags, which just have a key and value. There's no specific defined schema. So just when you're a user creating a resource, you're able to kind of just create a free-form tag as you like. With Oracle, we have our defined tags and defined schemas. And so this is kind of where a lot of the development and roadmap will be. It will be around the defined tags. It definitely gives you a bit more control, and there's a lot more features involved as well. And so this is kind of where you would define a specific key definition and then attach a value to it as well to get a bit more granular on how you want to classify or organize the resources in your tenancy. And then a great benefit with the defined tags, like we mentioned as well, is cost tracking. So you can enable those defined tags for cost tracking to be able to look at all the different charges that you're seeing across any of the resources that are tagged with, the specific cost tracking tag that you set up. And then again, with the tag namespaces, that's just part of the schema definition of defined tags. You can think of it as a container or like a bucket where you're placing all your defined tags in.
Thank you. And then there's also a way to automate tagging. So if you want to automate tagging based upon, a specific compartment, you can navigate to that compartment in the console, and there'll be a little section on the left-hand side to set up what's called a tag default. So a tag default is going to automatically apply tags to any new resource that's created within a compartment. And in order to do this, you would just set the tag namespace key and value under the tag default creation window. So when you select on that tag default, you'll be prompted to select your tag namespace, tag key, and default value. And there are also some tag variables that go with default tagging. So when your resources are being tagged, they're also going to be tagged with some important variables such as the principal name, whoever tagged that resource, and then also the date and time that the tag was applied. And we'll take a deeper look at this in the console. But some of the use cases around automating tagging would be just to have those secured tags, and then instead of having to think about if your users are applying tags appropriately, you can set up a tag default to ensure that your resources that are created are going to be tagged, right from the get-go. And it's important to know that if you already have resources that are existing within your compartment and you set up a tag default, it's not going to retroactively go back and tag your existing resources. So you would have to go back and manually tag your existing resources. But from that point on, when you set the tag default, it's going to automatically tag your resources that you deploy within that specified compartment, after you set that up. So. All right, and then this last slide here, we have compartments and tags. So this just kind of summarizes some of the things that we've already went over. And there's also some, best practices here that we have, such as, using defined tags. So like Uma mentioned, all of our new development is going to be around defined tags only. So it's important to use defined tags rather than free-form tags. And then another one would be to secure your tag namespaces and create at least 2 tag namespaces, one for all of your users, and then one that's going to be restricted for cost tracking. Uma, did you have any additional points you wanted to add in here?
Yeah, just kind of, I think this slide kind of does a good job of just reiterating, what we just went through, kind of the differences between compartments and tags and how you can kind of use those to better organize everything that you're using in your tenancy. So if you want to think of like your whole tenancy as, a file cabinet, compartments could be thought of as maybe folders, as a way to organize, your application and different resources that you'd be using. And then tags go even a little bit more granular. So, tagging specific items with the same, color Post-it note or something. So it's just kind of a way for you to look at the different resources in your pipeline that you're using and be able to classify them for everybody else in the company, kind of having a better view of the things that you'll be utilizing. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about the best practices for tagging, because we do have a few. Just one of the main things, which I think we mentioned before, was using defined tags over the freeform tags, because a lot of the feature development will be around defined tags for Oracle, as well as, creating those tag definitions for everything that you want to be able to search. And so like generally kind of asking yourself, like, what do I need to search on? And then use that specific tag, as well as securing your tag namespaces, like Brandon mentioned, having one specifically for cost tracking and then another separate one, as well as definitely utilizing those automation tools. So being able to use tag defaults for specific compartments to tag everything that's going to be created under a compartment, as well as the tag variables that will be captured. And so those are kind of the main important things that we kind of wanted to go through. And now I can actually take you guys into the console, where we will be taking like a deeper dive into compartments and tagging. So let me just grab the screen. Hopefully you guys can see it. So this is your home page for your OCI console right now. So this is kind of what it would look like if you logged in. You can kind of see some important things. Just at a quick glance, you can see the different billing charges. And for this tenancy, we just don't have permission because it's an internal tenancy, so we can't actually see the price or the amount of money being spent. But obviously for you guys, it will look a little bit different. You also have, quick starts to be able to deploy something very simple like our studio in a container, as well as like this top right corner, kind of looking at your region that you're using, as well as if you would like to access the Cloud Shell. We also have a quick kind of button for the announcements, and then just information more on your tenancy and user account. And then on the top left, we have like our menu symbol, which is kind of where you would go to access any and all resources that you are using in the cloud. And so first today, since we just finished talking about compartments and tagging, let's go into compartments. So it's going to be under the identity and security tab. Specifically under identity, we'll navigate to compartments. And we will be talking about in the following sessions a bit more about identity, because there's kind of a lot we can talk about it. But for right now, just know that compartments are used as a way to restrict access or to give access to different users to all the resources that are organized into the compartment. But here's just kind of a list of all the compartments that we have in this current internal tenancy. So your root tenancy or your root compartment is just going to be the overall tenancy. So every single compartment that I now create will be a child compartment of this overall parent compartment. So these are all the child compartments. And, creating a new compartment is very simple. You could just give it a name, give it a description, as well as navigate if you want it to be just a normal child compartment in the tenancy, or if you actually wanted to create it under an already existing compartment. So we'll navigate to Brandon's compartment just to show you guys. So we have this one compartment called individuals. And then underneath, you can see all the different compartments that people have created for themselves, where they can use and test different resources. You can also see some tags as well. Let's go into Brandon's because he has probably more tags. So going into this child compartment, you can go ahead and create another compartment. And I believe that you can go 6 layers deep in terms of creating child compartments. And so if you look at the tags, we have these tag variables that were captured. We can see, who created this compartment and at what date as well. And then again, it looks like he created another child compartment just to kind of to show. And it's very simple. And I could, again, do this another 5 times, like create a compartment here, go into that compartment, create another compartment until it's 6 levels deep. So that's kind of just a very simple way of showing, how you'd be able to create your compartments and create a subcompartment underneath it. So now we can go into tagging, which is going to be in the governance and administration under the tag namespaces. So you can see on the left what we can look at this different scopes. So we can look at, the namespaces in the root tenancy as well as for specific compartments as well. So I'll go back to the one that we're working in. So again, you can import standard tags from the root compartment, and then you can also go ahead and create your own tag namespace. You would just choose a compartment and then give it a name and description. You can even tag your tag namespace. And so right here, we have 3 different already made tag namespaces. So I'll go ahead and click on that. And then from there, this is where you can see all the different tag definitions that we've created. So you can kind of see from here, the value type is either string or list. And so that pretty much just means a string will just be a user defined value for the tag, and a list will be a list of strings that the user has to choose from. So if I go ahead and create like an example, this is also where I would be able to enable it for cost tracking or not. So if I did click this button, that means that the tag definition, everything tagged with this tag key definition will also be included in cost tracking. So if I wanted to create a budget off this tag, I'd be able to do that and look at all the different costs associated with resources that have this tag. And then I would be able to choose either the static value, so that's the string or user applied value, or a list. And then this is where I could like put my different options for them to choose from like a drop-down menu. So just to take you into what it looks like in this example key definition, we have environment. So let's say you wanted to tag your resources based off of environment. You can kind of see the different tag values, could be like development, UAT, or production. So that's just kind of like an example. And I believe this one is also enabled for cost tracking. So you can see we have 2 cost tracking tags and one that isn't. And then I'm actually going to go back into compartments really quickly, just so I can show you the tag defaults that Brendan and I talked about. So we've already created the tag namespace, human resources. In that tag namespace, we had a tag key definition called environment. And then we have, your list of options either being development, UAT, or production. So I can go ahead and actually create a tag default for that entire compartment. And I believe it is already created, but I'll show you how to do that. So if I wanted to create a tag default for this compartment, I would just simply choose the tag namespace that I want. So human resources again, and then I can choose environment. Oh, since this one's already existed, let's choose just demo or something. And then either I could choose a user applied value or I could choose default. So from the list of options, this was the list of options. And then I could go ahead and create this tag default. And there was another one kind of already being made that was already made with the tag key environment and development. So we can actually go ahead and let's say if I just wanted to go and create a compute instance, I could just go ahead. I'll leave all these options default for right now, since we're mainly just kind of showing you how the default tags would work. So I'll just go ahead and create anyway. And I probably won't even fully wait for this to provision because I just want to kind of show you the tagging section so you can kind of see the tag variables that were captured as well as the tag defaults. So there were two that we had, the environment one as well as our demo one. So that's kind of the quick on tagging. And then now I think we'll jump back into the presentation and talk a little bit more about cost management tools. And then we'll come back again and show you guys what that looks like on in the console as well.
Thanks, Uma. All right, can you see the slide?
Yes.
All right, so now we'll focus on budgeting, quotas, and cost analysis. So with OCI budgets, we can track actual and forecasted spending for the entire tenancy or on a per compartment basis. You can set alerts on your budgets at predefined thresholds to get notified. And then you can also view all your budgets and spending from one unified dashboard within Oracle Cloud. So we're going to show you a little bit more on setting this up in the console in a little bit here.
Mm-hmm. And something kind of else to note, so in order to use budgets, there does have to be a policy in place. And so kind of a lot of things when you first start using OCI, you have kind of no privileges by default. And then you'll have to create different policies to be able to do things in your tenancy and access certain things. So that's kind of the same thing with budgets. You have to have an IAM policy in place. And like Brandon mentioned, you can create it per compartment to track everything in a compartment, or you can create a budget based off of a cost tracking tag, which we'll show you how to do. And then you can also choose if you want to look at the actual spend, or if you want to look at the forecasted spend of, am I going to hit, my monthly amount? And by default, you're going to be notified by email, but you can also integrate with our notification service. So you can also be notified via, PagerDuty or Slack as well. And then you can also integrate this with our events, OCI event service, which is our event routing platform. So, you can publish to a stream, send a notification, or invoke a function even. And then there's also this concept of enforced budgets, which basically will automatically prevent any new resources from being created in a compartment or with that specific cost tracking tag if a budget is forecasted to be exceeded. And I believe that's, going to be in the roadmap as well for this tool.
Yep. And next we have quotas. So quotas can be used to set limits on how many resources can be used in your compartment. So for example, if you had, a limit internally that you only wanted to be able to create 10 compute instances of a certain shape, then you can set up a quota policy to, make that a thing. So your users can't create more than you specify within a quota. We also have service limits. So service limits are going to be the limits that limit your resources based upon, your tenancy, whereas quotas are going to be set at a compartment level. So that's the main difference there. And these are some of the use cases here on the slide that you can use quotas for. Like I mentioned, limiting the number of computing resources that you want within a specified compartment would be a great use case for quotas. And then, for each of these scenarios, you can use quotas. So if you wanted more control about the number of resources that you're allocating to each compartment, you would definitely want to use quotas. Uma, do you want to talk a little bit about the difference between a service limit and a quota?
Yeah, so like you mentioned before, your service limit is for your overall tenancies, so like your root compartment. And then these quotas are things that you can set specifically by, compartment that you've been creating. And then another thing to note is the service limits, that's set by Oracle. It's not set by the customer, but you can request an increase. So if you see, the need for scaling, And then you see, oh, you get some kind of error when you're trying to provision a compute instance. There's a very clear kind of error message saying like you've reached your service limit or you're trying to exceed that. So it's a very quick and easy fix to just request a service limit increase. And that usually gets approved by Oracle very quickly. But then quotas are pretty much set for, the tenancy administrators. So like people controlling your tenancy that are part of your company that pretty much just want to limit the amount of resources being spun up in specific compartments. And the main reason for that really is for to save on costs as well. So you don't want to be spinning up a bunch of expensive Exadata infrastructures, in a development compartment or something that doesn't need to have super expensive resources happening there. So that's kind of one of the main reasons we see people using quota examples. And yeah, if you go on to the next page, this kind of just shows a few examples. So when you say 0, that just removes all access to cloud resources for a compartment. So usually you'll start with 0, and then you could either use set or unset to set the number of instances that you want to allow in a specific compartment. So in the first example, we are allowing 10 VM standard 2.1 compute instances in a single compartment, but also in a specific region as well. So it can get like pretty granular. So we're not only saying in the compartment IT, but we're saying where specifically we're in Phoenix. So this doesn't apply to, when you're in Ashburn, but you're still working in the IT compartment. So that's just a set example. And then the next example is an unset example. So we're clearing the quotas here. So any limits on this resource will now be enforced back to the service limits, which are, again, the ones set for your whole tenancy by Oracle. And so we are unsetting the quota for a VM dense IO 1.16 count in the tenancy. So that's just a quick example. And then the next slide. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and it's just important to reiterate that the best practice is to use service limits to control your tenancy, and then quotas with your specific compartments.
Yeah, so kind of like putting everything together, and these are just like the different strategies. So a lot of times companies will organize their resources into compartments based off the project, and then also tag them by the cost center. And then also, making sure that you're creating budgets for each project as well as cost center, and then being able to break down those costs using the cost analysis like dashboard in our console as well, and doing this kind of on a regular basis to see where the charges are coming from, as well as being able to use quota policies and creating quotas for specific compartments just to limit the use of, again, expensive resources that don't necessarily need to be being provisioned.
Yep.
Yeah, so now I think we have one more thing. So before we go into the console, we just want to talk a little bit about Oracle Cloud Advisor. So the Cloud Advisor is a recommendation engine that helps guide you and implement like best practices to help you basically optimize all your spend in OCI. So as you can kind of see here from the screenshot, it has a bunch of different recommendations kind of categorized into security, cost management, performance, and high availability. And so kind of it's just a tool that will internally scan your tenancy and kind of find any inefficiencies in it. And then the recommendations will pop up on the Cloud Advisor page and just let you know, like, hey, this could be something that you could do to kind of minimize your costs. And then you can choose to, implement it or not, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. So I think we can jump into the console and show them this tool.
Yes. So let me go ahead and do that. So we'll be working in the governance and administration, actually, under Cloud Advisor. And usually, I don't believe it's enabled by default. It probably, if you first go to this page and you've never used it before, you'd have to click a button to enable it. But once it's enabled, it'll look like this, except obviously you won't see 0 here. You'll see like an actual number with the savings. But you can kind of see here that we have our cost management recommendations, and then it gives you kind of a quick of which ones it finds critical, which ones it finds not as critical, as well as we have high availability recommendations and performance. And then lastly, our security ones. And the security is taken from our CloudGuard, and CloudGuard is also another automated recommendation engine that Oracle provides in the console, but instead of it being kind of aimed towards more cost management, it's really aimed to help your security posture. So it finds any inefficiencies in how you have created specific things that may invoke a bit of risk to your security, and then it'll give you kind of recommendations based off of that. So that's kind of what it looks like at a quick glance. And then you can go into recommendations and see. So the advisor has, like a set of cost saving recommendations, like deleting unattached boot volumes, or like downsizing underutilized VMs. And so each recommendation will be specific to a resource. So if I go ahead and like click in here, I can actually see all the different resources that this recommendation wants me to target. And then I can go ahead and click the specific resources and implement or postpone or dismiss if I'm saying, this is actually not that important to me. I don't really want to get notified on that. That's kind of where you could go in and see.
Yeah, and UMA doesn't have the access to see the cost within this tenancy. So you'll also be able to see your estimated savings.
Yeah. It's just for internal tenancies. They don't let us. And then history as well. This is kind of just another way to see all the different recommendations, but here you can kind of filter a little bit more by the type, and you can see again the specific recommendation, the type, compartment, the type of recommendation, so what it's telling you to do, as well as the status, if it's been implemented or not. And then we also have your ability to customize it, because again, we realize that each workload is going to have, different performance characteristics. So you're kind of able for different recommendations to pick something called a recommendation profile. So that could be aggressive, conservative, or balanced. And these profiles can be targeted at specific workloads using your tags. And each, again, like Brandon mentioned, the recommendations should have an estimated cost savings, just to kind of help your team focus on which recommendations will have the highest impact to your tenancy. And so these are kind of the global recommendations that you could create an override for. So you can see we have just a standard recommendation profile. But if I wanted to create a specific override, I'd be able to here. I could choose the specific recommendation and then choose, the profile that I want. So whether it be conservative, standard, or aggressive. And then look at the specific evaluation period. I believe Cloud Advisor takes data every 24 hours, and then after 7 days, it'll have enough data to accumulate and then, make recommendations and have the associated cost savings. And then obviously you'd also choose kind of the metric you want to look at. So your average or the 95th percentile. And so you can kind of go in and see here that we have created an override for this specific compartment as well, and chosen a aggressive recommendation profile. So that's what it looks like to create a customization on this. And then let me kind of backtrack a little bit and just take you through the cost management and quota policies, since we mentioned those earlier. So this is something that hopefully you guys will become familiar with as you use OCI more and more. It's definitely a really good way to kind of get a look at your daily costs and usage of all the resources that you're using across your tenancy. And again, it's not going to look like how it looks like for me, for you guys, because I'm not able to see any of the costs. So it's just going to look like zero. But usually this would look kind of like a bar graph, where you would see different columns for the corresponding resources that you're using, and then the costs for kind of each day. And then we also have it, in a different format down here. And you can kind of add different filters, look at the different, regions or services to show your cost or your usage as well. as well, grouping by different grouping dimensions as well. So that's just something to point out. And then now we'll look at budgets. So these are all the budgets that we have created for our tenancy so far. And you can see they're all compartment budgets. So they're all just targeting a specific compartment. So you can kind of see I even have one for my own compartment. And so let me just first actually show you guys how to create one, and I'll show how to create a cost tracking one. So cost tracking tag budget. So basically how it would work is I would choose the scope again, like if I wanted to just choose a compartment, or if I wanted to work off a cost tracking tag. If I chose compartment, just right here, there'd be a drop down of all the different compartments. And then I would just choose which one I wanted to target. But for cost tracking, I'd go ahead and choose the specific tag. And again, it would have to be a tag that is enabled for cost tracking. So we had a third one in this namespace, but it wasn't enabled. So it's not really going to show up here. But if I wanted to go ahead and kind of use the same tag key that we were working with and say, you know, I want to look at all of the resources tag for development, I could do that. And then I would obviously give it a budget amount. So like just going to use $1,000 for this. And you can also choose the day that you want your budget to process. So we'll just keep it at 1. And then this is where you'd actually add in your alert rule. So you could either choose if you want to look at the actual spend or like the forecasted amount, as well as if you want the type to be like an absolute dollar amount or a threshold of the budget that you just like specified up here. So, you know, you can go ahead and add maybe 80% of the actual spend. So once it hits that 80%, then you'll be notified. And this is where you would put all of your email recipients. And then you can have just a message. So budget has reached 80%, something like that. And then you can go ahead and create that cost tracking tag. And so just to kind of show you the one that we already created, this was a test budget. And I again used the same thing where I had $1,000 as my budget amount. And I was looking at the actual spend and 80%. But I can add more alert rules if I want to. So let's say I also want to be notified when my forecast hits 100%. So then if I can do that, then I'll be able to kind of see, okay, like not only am I reaching 80% of my actual spend, but it's also forecasted that I might hit 100%. And I could go ahead and create an alert rule that way as well. So I think the last thing that we want to show you guys is our quota policies. So again, this is first just right here under the governance tag. We have, again, the tag namespaces we went over. We have our quota policies and then limits, quotas, and usage. So these are your service limits set for the entire tenancy by Oracle. And so you can kind of see the different services that you can kind of look at, as well as the scope. Or even compartment as well, and then kind of see what the service limit has, how much you're using, how much is available as well. And what's great about this is if I wanted to, let's say, create a quota policy based off of this service limit, it's very easy. I would just click create quota policy stub and then copy it. And then I could go to quota policies and go ahead and create a test one. I would just add it in here, and then I could change the number. And then I could also, instead of targeting, you know, that was the root compartment name, I could target a specific compartment. And then I could also, you know, tag this quota policy if I want to as well. So that's just an example. And then we have one created already. We're limiting the number of 4 compute shapes to 5. So first we have to zero out the compute quotas in the specific region Ashburn. And this is the compartment that is targeting. So it's targeting just the specific child compartment. So that's why it's it kind of has the notation of the parent compartment than the child compartment, because they don't want it to apply to all of the child compartments under this specific one. It just wants to target the single one. And then we're just setting this count to 5 again in this demo, or in this compartment called demo. And then one last thing is, actually I went to the wrong place, but if you click this tab, this is kind of where you could request a limit increase. So this is for, your support requests. If you're having any issues in your tenancy, you'd come here. But if you just wanted to request a limit increase, you could go here and it'll ask you to log in and then submit a request. So very simple that way. Okay, so I think that was it that we wanted to show you. We can maybe go back to the presentation right now to wrap up. Any last things?
Yep, sounds good. All right, can you see the screen here?
Yes.
All right, so I guess our final slide here is just some additional resources. So we have our OCI training and certification links there. Then we have a link to our OCI hands-on labs. If you wanted to get certified, I think that we're still doing some like free training. So definitely click on some of these links and find out more about that. But I think that was it for today's presentation on business ops and governance. So I think with that, we can hand it back over to Kenna.
Excellent. Thanks so much for this presentation, you two. Are there any last questions that people have? Please feel free to drop that in the Q&A and we'll take a look before we all leave to make sure that you have all your questions answered. And as you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and launch our final poll because we always like to hear a little bit of feedback from folks at the end of the session. And just to take a moment and see if there's any questions in that Q&A box that didn't get answered. I know there were some other ones that got answered live earlier, so I don't see any outstanding ones at the moment. But if I'm wrong, please feel free to jump in and take a last moment to do that. Otherwise, we are going to have the next in this series. We'll have we have sort of an alternating Tuesday, Wednesday coming up. So we have one coming up next Wednesday with Larry and Jeremy, and then we'll have Brandon and Uma back in 2 weeks on the Tuesday for the next one in this series as well. So 6 total in each series, lots of really great information and chances for questions and answers and engagement. So thank you, Uma and Brandon, for bringing this presentation today. Thank you everyone for joining us and asking questions and diving into this with us. And we will hopefully see you next time. Thanks so much, folks. Have a great day.
Thank you.